The convent stood quietly on the edge of a small Italian town, where time seemed to move a little slower, and life followed the rhythm of church bells and prayer. The building was old, its walls covered with climbing vines and small flowers that bloomed each spring. Inside, everything was calm, the soft sound of footsteps on stone floors, the whisper of pages turning in prayer books, and the faint scent of candles and soap. Among the sisters who lived there was an elderly nun who everyone simply called Sister Agnes. She had been in the convent for more than 50 years. Her figure was small and thin, her gray hair always tucked neatly under her white veil. Her hands, though wrinkled, still moved with quiet strength. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her voice carried a peaceful warmth that made people feel calm. Most of the younger sisters admired her, not just for her devotion, but for her kindness. She was always the first to rise in the morning, lighting the candles in the chapel before anyone else was awake. She tended the small garden behind the convent, growing herbs and vegetables that fed everyone. And even in her old age, she helped with chores, folding laundry and cleaning with gentle patience. To the world outside, she was just another elderly nun living a simple life of service and prayer. But long before she came to the convent, Sister Agnes had lived a very different kind of life. Many years ago, before she wore a habit, she had been a music teacher. She had grown up in a small village where her father worked as a carpenter, and her mother sang in the church choir. From a young age, Agnes had a love for music that no one could ignore. When she was 6, she would sneak into the church to touch the piano keys, pressing them softly just to hear their magic sound. Her parents couldn't afford music lessons at first, but the parish priest noticed her passion and began teaching her after Sunday Mass. Within a few years, she could play hymns so beautifully that the whole church would turn to look at her during service. By the time she turned 16, she was performing for small gatherings and helping teach younger children how to play. Her dream had always been simple: to share music, to make people feel something they couldn't explain. But life had other plans. When the war came to her country, many of her friends left, some never returned, and her family struggled to survive. The piano she loved so much was sold to pay for food. In those hard years, music became a quiet memory tucked deep inside her heart. After the war, she joined a convent. No one knew exactly why she made that choice. Some said she wanted peace after so much loss. Others believed she simply wanted to serve God in silence. Whatever the reason, she entered the convent and never spoke much about her past again. Inside the convent's old hall stood a piano, a heavy, dark wooden one that had seen better days. Dust gathered on its surface and the keys were slightly yellowed with age. Once in a while, visiting priests or guests would try to play it, but few cared enough to keep it tuned. It sat there quietly, like a forgotten relic of another time. Sister Agnes would sometimes pause near it when she was sweeping the floor. She would look at the piano for a few seconds, her eyes soft and thoughtful, then continue with her work. None of the younger sisters noticed this small moment, except perhaps one, a cheerful novice named Lucia, who often helped Sister Agnes in the kitchen. One afternoon, as they peeled potatoes together, Lucia said, "Sister, I've seen you looking at the piano sometimes. Do you know how to play?" Sister Agnes smiled but didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out the window at the garden, where the sunlight was shining through the trees. "Once," she said softly, "a long time ago. Then you must show us," Lucia said with excitement. "We could sing along. I'm sure everyone would love it." Sister Agnes only chuckled and shook her head. "My hands are old now, child. The music belongs to younger ones." After that, Lucia never asked again, but she kept the thought in her heart. She often wondered what kind of music the old nun used to play, and how someone so gentle could carry so much mystery in her silence. Life in the convent continued in its peaceful way. Every morning began with prayer. Every evening ended with candlelight and hymns. But beyond the gates of the convent, the world was changing fast. Social media, news, and new technologies were becoming part of daily life. The convent tried to stay untouched by these things, but sometimes the outside world found a way in. One day, a letter arrived from the town's parish office. The church was organizing a charity concert to raise money for an orphanage that had been damaged in a storm. The event would be held at the convent's hall, as it had the best piano in the area. Musicians and singers from the nearby academy were invited to perform. The sisters were excited. It was rare to have visitors and music in their quiet home. The younger nuns began decorating the hall with flowers and ribbons. They cleaned the piano, polished the wooden benches, and hung lanterns along the walls. Sister Agnes helped too, moving slowly but steadily, arranging chairs and making sure everything looked simple yet welcoming. The night before the concert, the music students arrived to rehearse. The sound of the piano filled the hall for the first time in years, echoing down the corridors. The younger sisters peeked through the door, giggling softly, amazed by how lively the place felt. Sister Agnes stood in the back watching quietly. As the young pianist practiced, something stirred deep within her. Each note brought back a memory, the feel of smooth ivory under her fingers, the sound of laughter from her students, the way music could make time disappear. Her heart ached not with sadness but with longing. She wanted just once to touch those keys again, not to perform, but simply to remember who she once was. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Sister Agnes walked to the hall alone. The candles had burned low, casting a soft glow on the piano. She stood there for a long time, her hands clasped together. Finally, she reached out and gently lifted the cover. Her fingers brushed across the keys. Cool, smooth, familiar. She pressed one softly. A note rang out, slightly out of tune but still beautiful. She smiled faintly, a tear glistening in her eye. Then she closed the lid again and whispered, "Maybe not yet." What she didn't know was that life had a strange way of bringing old dreams back to light, often when we least expect it. The next day, the preparations for the charity event continued. Visitors arrived, decorations were adjusted, and everyone rushed about making sure things were perfect. The event organizer, a local director named Paolo, thanked the sisters for hosting. He was young, confident, and polite, though a bit impatient. He wanted everything to look professional. During the final rehearsal, one of the music students fell ill, the pianist who was supposed to play the main piece. Paolo looked frustrated. "We'll need a replacement," he said. "Otherwise, we'll have to cancel that part." Sister Lucia, remembering her conversation from weeks ago, hesitated before speaking. "Sister Agnes, she knows how to play," she said quietly. The director blinked. "The elderly sister?" Lucia nodded shyly. "Yes, she used to be a music teacher. She might be able to help." Paolo smiled politely but shook his head. "I'm sure she's a kind woman, but this is a difficult piece." "We can't risk it." Sister Lucia tried again, her voice hopeful. "Maybe you could just let her try." But he had already turned away, too busy organizing the singers. The suggestion faded into the noise of preparations, and no one mentioned it again that day. That evening, as the sun set behind the convent, Sister Agnes sat in the chapel, her rosary in hand. She could hear faint music drifting in from the hall, the rehearsals continuing without her. She wasn't angry or hurt, only thoughtful. Perhaps it was better this way, she told herself. Maybe the world no longer needed her music. Still, deep inside, a spark remained. The day of the concert arrived, and the convent hall buzzed with quiet excitement. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, touching the polished wooden floor and casting long, warm shadows across the room. Chairs were neatly arranged for the guests. Candles were lined up along the walls, and the piano gleamed faintly in the corner, as though it had been waiting for this moment for years. Sister Agnes went about her morning tasks like usual. She cleaned the last traces of dust from the hall, arranged small bouquets of flowers on the tables, and checked the candles. Her movements were slow but deliberate, and there was a certain calmness in everything she did. The younger nuns, bustling with energy, noticed her serenity but didn't say much. They had learned long ago that Sister Agnes preferred silence to chatter. By late afternoon, the first guests began arriving. Families from the town, a few local officials, and some journalists came to attend the charity concert. The hall, though small, had a cozy charm. The smell of polished wood mixed with faint floral scents from the decorations, and a soft hum of voices filled the space. Everyone was eager to see the performances and support the orphanage. The musicians began to prepare. The young pianist, who had practiced earlier, looked nervous, fidgeting with the sheet music. Then the director, Paolo, discovered the pianist had fallen sick overnight. He rushed around, checking with his team, trying to find a replacement. The room suddenly felt tense. Without a pianist, the main performance would be canceled, and the event might lose its charm. Lucia hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. "Maybe Sister Agnes could play," she said softly. Paolo turned sharply, his brows knitting. The elderly nun? Are you serious? She used to be a music teacher, Lucia explained, a little more insistently. She knows the piano better than anyone here. Paolo sighed and rubbed his forehead. He glanced at the quiet, small figure of Sister Agnes arranging the candles. She looked frail, almost delicate, and he doubted that she could manage the piece. I don't think it's possible, he said. This is a complicated performance. We need someone trained recently, someone strong enough to handle it. Sister Agnes had been standing nearby, listening quietly. She looked at the piano, then at the young students preparing nervously, and finally at the worried faces of the sisters. She could see their hope, their quiet pleading without words. Slowly, she stepped forward. I can try, she said in her soft, calm voice. Paolo's eyes widened. Are you sure? This is a big audience. The piece is not easy, Sister Agnes nodded. I only play to serve, not to impress. If it can help, I will do it. There was a pause. The room seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Paolo shrugged. All right. One chance. If it doesn't work, we'll find another solution. The hall was quiet as Sister Agnes approached the piano. Guests were already arriving, and some had taken their seats, chatting softly. No one knew yet that this small, quiet nun would soon become the center of attention. She lifted the cover of the piano and placed her hands gently on the keys. For a moment, her fingers hovered, almost hesitating. Then she pressed down and the first note rang out. It was soft, fragile, and slightly hesitant, but there was a beauty in it that immediately captured attention. The audience paused mid-conversation. People turned toward the piano, noticing the delicate figure of the elderly nun. She began to play the piece slowly at first, easing into the rhythm, letting her fingers remember every movement after so many years. The notes were like a story, unfolding gently, filled with emotion and depth. At first, some of the younger musicians and sisters whispered among themselves, unsure if it was going to work. But as the music continued, the doubts melted away. Each chord, each melody, carried a sense of experience of someone who had lived through joys and sorrows and still found peace in music. It was not just skill. It was life itself pouring through the keys. Sister Agnes's eyes were partly closed as she played, her focus absolute. Occasionally she would glance at the sheet music, but mostly she played from memory, letting her fingers guide the music. The notes filled the hall, soft at first, then swelling into a rich, full sound that seemed to embrace everyone in the room. People in the audience felt a strange quietness settle over them. Conversation stopped, footsteps paused, and even the youngest children sat still, mesmerized. Some guests had tears in their eyes, though they did not know why. The music was gentle but powerful, like a language everyone understood but could not speak. Paolo, the director, stood near the back, unable to believe what he was hearing. He had doubted Sister Agnes, thinking she was too old, too fragile, too slow to handle the performance. Yet here she was, playing with a skill and grace that could rival the best pianists he had ever heard. His hands trembled slightly and he felt a lump in his throat. As the piece continued, the young musicians joined in. The strings and voices complemented the piano perfectly, but it was clear that Sister Agnes was the heart of the performance. Every note she played seemed to guide the others, giving the music a sense of unity and purpose that went beyond the technicalities of practice. The music reached a soft, delicate climax, and for a few moments there was nothing but the sound of the hall itself. Even the birds outside seemed to hush, as if the world had paused to listen. When she finally finished, there was a brief silence. The room felt as though it had been holding its breath, afraid to break the magic. Then the applause began. At first it was soft, tentative, as if no one was sure if they were allowed to clap. Then it grew louder, stronger, unstoppable. People stood, some wiping tears from their eyes, others clapping so hard their hands ached. The young musicians looked at her in awe, realizing that the fragile-looking nun had just led them through one of the most moving performances of their lives. Sister Agnes remained seated, her hands resting gently on the keys. She looked around at the faces in the audience and smiled softly. She did not stand or bow for praise. That was never her way. For her, the joy was in sharing the music and seeing the hearts of the people touched. Lucia ran to her side, her eyes shining. "Sister, that was incredible! Everyone is talking about you." Sister Agnes laughed quietly, a sound like wind through leaves. "It was not about me, child. Music belongs to everyone if they only listen." The guests continued to approach after the performance. Some were curious, asking how long she had studied music. Others simply nodded, overwhelmed by emotion, unable to speak. A few asked if they could record her playing, and she allowed them, though she seemed unaware of the impact it would have beyond the hall. By the end of the evening, word had begun to spread. The local newspaper journalist took notes and photographs, describing the unexpected brilliance of the elderly nun. A few visitors shared videos on social media, and within hours the performance began to gain attention online. People from towns far away were watching, commenting and sharing, amazed by the story of a woman who had been overlooked for so long, only to reveal a talent that had never faded. Despite the sudden attention, Sister Agnes returned to her quiet life. She did not seek fame or recognition. The younger sisters encouraged her, saying that everyone should know how special she was, but she would only smile and return to her duties, folding laundry, tending the garden, and lighting the chapel candles. Still, inside the hearts of those who had witnessed her play, something had changed. The music had reminded them that age could never limit passion, that quiet lives could hold hidden brilliance, and that sometimes miracles appear in the most unexpected forms. That night, after the guests had gone and the hall was empty, Sister Agnes sat by the piano once more. She played softly for herself this time, letting the melody drift into the still night. The sound was personal, private, and full of memories. The music of a lifetime lived fully, yet shared with all who needed it. As she finished, she looked out the window at the moonlight reflecting on the garden. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a peace that comes from knowing one has given their best, not for applause or recognition, but simply because it was what the heart demanded. The next morning, news of her performance had reached the town, the parish, and even beyond. Some came to the convent just to see the nun who had stunned the world with her piano, yet she greeted everyone with the same calm kindness, never letting attention change her. Even in the small town among the convent walls, it was clear that life had shifted slightly. People spoke in whispers of the remarkable performance of the gentle nun whose music had captured something universal. They told stories of how she had transformed a quiet charity event into a moment that would be remembered forever. And through it all, Sister Agnes continued her simple life, unaware that she had inspired more people than she could ever imagine. She had only done what she had always done, listened to the music in her heart and shared it with the world when it was needed most. The morning after the charity concert, the convent was quieter than usual. Sister Agnes moved through the hallways as she always did, carrying a basket of laundry and humming softly to herself. The sun streamed through the windows, falling on the polished wooden floor, but there was something different in the air. A gentle excitement seemed to float in the halls, though no one had announced anything yet. Lucia, the young novice, could barely keep her composure. She had stayed up late the night before, watching the videos some visitors had shared online. People from different towns, different countries even, were posting comments about the elderly nun's performance. "Have you seen this?" she whispered to another sister, showing her the phone. "Look at how many views it has. Everyone is talking about her." Sister Agnes walked by without glancing at the screen. She smiled softly at the excitement, but didn't seem concerned about the attention. For her, the music was never about fame. She preferred quiet service, tending to her duties, and finding joy in simple things, like the first bloom of spring in the garden, or the warmth of sunlight on her hands as she cleaned the chapel. By mid-morning, the convent started receiving visitors. A few journalists had come, hoping to interview her, and some curious townspeople wanted to see the nun who had touched so many hearts. The younger sisters tried to prepare her, brushing her veil, adjusting her habit, and explaining the questions she might be asked. But Sister Agnes simply listened, nodded, and then quietly went about her work. The first journalist, a kind woman with glasses and a notebook, approached her carefully. "Sister Agnes," she said softly, "your performance last night, it was extraordinary. Could you tell us why you chose to play that piece?" Sister Agnes looked at her, her eyes calm and thoughtful. "I play because it is what my heart knows. The music belongs to everyone. It is not about me, but about the moment we share." The journalist paused, not sure how to respond. She had expected stories of practice, ambition, or dreams of fame, but this gentle answer surprised her. She quickly wrote down the words, feeling that they carried a truth deeper than anything she had ever heard in interviews before. Soon, more visitors arrived. Some came from neighboring towns. Others had heard about the performance online and traveled hours just to see the nun who had amazed everyone. The convent hall, usually quiet and simple, was now filled with curious eyes and whispers of admiration. Everyone wanted to see her, to speak to her, to understand how someone so ordinary-looking could produce music so extraordinary. Despite the crowd, Sister Agnes remained calm. She greeted people with a soft smile and continued with her chores. She helped serve tea to the guests, folded laundry in the corner, and even tended to the small garden outside. People watched in amazement, realizing that the same hands that had created such beautiful music also carried the gentleness of a lifetime of service. The news began to spread beyond the small town. Videos of her playing circulated across social media. Comments poured in from all over the country and even from other nations. People were amazed not only by her skill but by her age and humility. Many wrote that she had reminded them that talent does not fade with time, and that greatness can come from the most unexpected places. Some media outlets wanted to feature her on television. They called the convent to request interviews and even suggested filming another performance. The sisters were unsure what to do. They had never welcomed cameras or reporters before. They had always preferred a simple life of prayer and work. Yet they could see that the world was drawn to Sister Agnes's story, and that something she had shared through music had touched countless hearts. One afternoon, a young man arrived from the city carrying a camera. "I'd love to film you playing again," he said politely. "Just a short piece for people who have never seen you before." Sister Agnes paused, looking at the piano in the corner of the hall. She had not planned to perform again so soon, yet there was a quiet understanding in her heart. Music was not something to hide, and if it could bring joy or comfort to others, perhaps she should play. "Very well," she said softly, "but I play only for the music, not for praise." The camera crew set up quickly, trying to be as unobtrusive as possible. The younger sisters moved aside, giving her space. The hall was empty now, save for the crew and a few nuns who quietly watched. Sister Agnes approached the piano, lifted the lid, and let her hands rest on the keys. For a moment she closed her eyes and remembered last night. She remembered the audience, the soft faces of children, the quiet admiration of the sisters, and the joy of feeling the music rise and fall through her fingertips. Then she pressed the first note. The sound filled the hall softly, slowly building into the familiar melody. The camera rolled, but Sister Agnes did not think about it. She did not notice the lenses or the lights. She only heard the music inside her heart and let it flow. The piece was gentle, full of emotion, carrying a sense of hope, longing, and peace. Every note seemed to reach beyond the walls of the hall, as if it could touch anyone who heard it. When the final chord faded, the hall was silent for a moment. Then a quiet applause began, though there was no audience to cheer. Even the camera crew felt a strange sense of awe. They had expected skill, but what they witnessed was something far greater. A life expressed through music, a presence that commanded attention without effort. Sister Agnes smiled faintly, her hands resting on the keys. "It is enough," she said softly. "The music has been shared." As the day went on, the convent received phone calls, letters, and more visitors. Schools wanted her to speak to students. Community centers invited her for small performances, and people continued to share videos online. Sister Agnes listened politely, thanked everyone for their kind words, but quietly continued her daily tasks. She never sought attention, and she never demanded recognition. One afternoon, the parish priest visited. He had heard about the performance and wanted to see Sister Agnes for himself. He found her in the garden, gently pruning the roses and humming softly. "My child," he said, smiling warmly, "you have reminded people of something very important. Talent, kindness, and devotion do not age. You have given more than music. You have given hope." Sister Agnes looked at him, her eyes reflecting quiet gratitude. "I only play because it is in me. The rest belongs to those who listen." The priest nodded. He had seen many musicians perform in his life, but none had carried such humility alongside such beauty. He blessed her quietly and left, knowing that this small nun had changed something in the hearts of everyone who had seen her play. That evening, the convent was unusually quiet again. The sisters gathered for their usual prayers, but there was an energy in the room, a sense of something alive and new. Even the youngest novices could feel it. That one life lived quietly and humbly, could ripple outward and touch the world. Sister Agnes sat in her small room afterward, looking at the moonlight streaming through the window. She held a small photograph of the old piano she had played as a child. Her hands traced the edges gently, remembering the long journey from the small village to this quiet convent. She had never sought recognition, never wanted fame, yet somehow her music had spoken louder than words could. The next morning, the world continued to respond. Newspapers, social media posts, and emails kept arriving. People wrote about her story with admiration, sharing how the elderly nun had reminded them that life and talent could flourish at any age. Some shared personal stories of grandparents, parents, and mentors who had quietly carried gifts waiting to be noticed. Sister Agnes's music had inspired others to look at their own lives differently, to treasure hidden talents, and to believe in the quiet strength of human hearts. Visitors continued to come, but Sister Agnes never let it disturb her simple life. She continued tending the garden, lighting candles in the chapel, and caring for her fellow sisters. She would play the piano sometimes quietly without an audience, letting the music flow through her heart rather than for recognition. And yet, no matter how many people watched or shared her story, the magic of her performance remained the same, gentle, humble, and full of life. It reminded everyone that the world often overlooks the quiet, the elderly, and the unnoticed. But within them, there can be a brilliance that changes hearts and lifts spirits in ways that cannot be measured or predicted. As the sun set over the convent that evening, Sister Agnes sat by the piano, her hands resting softly on the keys. The memory of the last performance lingered in the air like a soft whisper. She did not play for fame or attention, but she allowed herself a small smile, knowing that the music she loved had reached hearts far beyond the convent walls. And somewhere in that quiet reflection, she understood something important, that life, service, and music were connected in a way that no audience, applause, or attention could ever truly capture. They were about sharing a piece of the soul, and in doing so, touching others in ways that last far longer than a single performance. The charity concert had ended days ago, yet the memory of the elderly nun's performance continued to ripple through the town and beyond. People who had attended still whispered about the delicate notes and the quiet power that had filled the convent hall. The news and social media coverage kept her story alive, and many were discovering the videos online for the first time. But even as attention grew, Sister Agnes remained the same gentle, humble figure who moved quietly among the sisters, tending to her daily tasks without a thought for recognition or fame. That morning, sunlight filtered softly through the convent windows, illuminating the hall and dust motes that danced in the warm air. The piano, once silent for years, stood quietly in the corner. Its keys gleamed faintly, and the memory of the previous performance seemed to linger in the room. Sister Agnes approached it slowly, her steps deliberate as though she carried the weight of both her past and the present. Lucia entered the hall, her eyes wide with excitement. "Sister, people are still talking about you everywhere. The videos. They've been shared thousands of times. Even the city newspapers want to feature you. You've inspired so many." Sister Agnes smiled softly, shaking her head. "Child, I play because it is in my heart. I never expected such attention. But people need to see you to hear your story," Lucia insisted. "You've reminded them that life doesn't end with age, that talent and love can exist quietly for years waiting to be shared." Sister Agnes paused, considering this. She had always believed that music was a gift meant to be given, not for fame, but to touch the hearts of those who would listen. Perhaps now, the gift she had long kept inside could reach even further. The day passed quietly until a knock came at the convent doors. A small group of visitors had arrived from the town nearby, curious and eager to meet the nun who had enchanted the world with her music. They were not wealthy or important people, just ordinary individuals who had been moved by the story online. Sister Agnes greeted them with her usual calm warmth, inviting them in without ceremony or fuss. The visitors entered the hall slowly, taking in the familiar yet now extraordinary scene. The piano stood in its corner, polished and waiting. The hall smelled faintly of candles and fresh flowers, and the sunlight streamed through the windows, touching the wooden floor with gentle warmth. They looked at Sister Agnes, a small figure in her simple habit, and could hardly imagine that such brilliance had emerged from someone so quiet and unassuming. One of the visitors, a young woman with a notebook, asked softly, "Sister, could you play for us? Just a little, if you wish." Sister Agnes nodded, her hands moving instinctively to the piano keys. She did not consider the attention or the cameras. She only felt the music within her ready to flow. Her fingers rested lightly on the keys for a moment, then pressed down, and the first note filled the hall. The sound was soft at first, gentle, like a whisper carried on the wind. It grew slowly, weaving a story through each chord and melody. The visitors sat in silence, captivated. They had expected skill, yes, but not the depth of emotion that seemed to rise with every note. Sister Agnes was not just playing music. She was telling a story of a lifetime lived with dedication, of quiet moments of joy and sorrow, of hope preserved through years of solitude and service. A few minutes into the piece, one of the visitors reached out and held their companion's hand. Their eyes filled with tears, though they could not explain exactly why. The music was speaking to them, filling spaces they did not know existed. Another visitor, an older man, leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands, listening as if trying to absorb every vibration, every whisper of sound. Even Lucia, who had heard Sister Agnes play before, felt a new wave of emotion. She had watched her countless times, but today, seeing her share so openly with strangers, she realized the true power of her music. It was not about technique, not about perfection. It was about honesty, about expressing something so deep and real that it could touch anyone who listened. The piece reached a gentle climax, each note rising and falling like waves on a calm sea. Sister Agnes's hands moved gracefully, seemingly without effort, though every finger carried the weight of decades of practice, memory, and experience. She did not hurry, she did not pause unnecessarily. The music was patient, deliberate, and full of meaning. As the final notes faded into the air, the visitors remained silent for a moment, unsure if they should break the spell. Then slowly one of them clapped. It was soft at first, hesitant, and then others joined in. The applause grew, echoing through the hall, but even in that, there was respect. A quiet acknowledgement of something extraordinary, not loud or showy, but heartfelt and sincere. Sister Agnes lowered her hands from the keys, offering a small, humble smile.
"Music is a gift," she said softly, "and it is shared best when it touches hearts quietly."
Without expectation, the visitors approached her one by one, sharing stories of how the performance had moved them. A young man spoke about how the music reminded him of his grandmother, who had loved the piano but had passed away long ago. An older woman mentioned that she had never thought she could learn to play again, but after hearing Sister Agnes, she felt inspired to try. Children who had been part of the audience days before described how the music had felt like a story, alive and magical. As the day went on, more people arrived. Word had spread quickly that Sister Agnes was in the hall, and soon the convent became a place of quiet pilgrimage. People came not to see a celebrity or hear a famous musician, but to witness something real, a lifetime of talent expressed with humility and love. By afternoon, a local radio station called. They wanted to interview her for a short broadcast, to share her story with listeners who could not be present. Sister Agnes agreed, her tone calm and simple. She spoke about music, about life in the convent, and about the joy of sharing one's gifts without expecting anything in return. Her words, like her music, were gentle but powerful, resonating with everyone who heard them. Even as attention continued to grow, the sisters watched with amazement at how Sister Agnes remained unchanged. She continued her work, tending the garden, cleaning the hall, and lighting candles in the chapel. She never allowed the attention to make her proud or distracted. To her, service and devotion remained the most important things. That evening, after the visitors had left, Sister Agnes returned to the piano alone. The hall was empty, quiet, and bathed in the soft glow of the setting sun. She played a few notes, not for anyone else, but for herself. Each sound carried memories, gratitude, and the simple joy of life expressed through music. As she played, she thought of the people she had met that day, the tears in their eyes, the smiles on their faces, and the stories they had shared. She realized that music, though silent for so long, had become a bridge between her quiet life and the hearts of others. It had allowed her to connect, to touch, and to inspire without needing recognition or applause. By nightfall, the convent was calm once more. Sister Agnes returned to her small room, the moonlight streaming gently across her bed. She sat for a while, reflecting on the day, feeling a quiet satisfaction. She had not sought attention or fame, yet through her music, She had reached people in ways she could never have imagined. Somewhere in the town, people continued to speak about her performance, sharing stories, posting videos, and commenting on the quiet power of her music. Children spoke of the gentle nun who played as if telling a story. Adults discussed the beauty of humility and dedication, and even strangers far away were moved by the sincerity in every note. Sister Agnes slept peacefully that night, knowing that the music had found its way to hearts that needed it. She did not wonder about the views, the comments, or the fame. For her, the magic was in the sharing, the quiet connection, and the knowledge that something simple, like music from a small forgotten piano, could bring light into the world. The next morning, the convent resumed its usual rhythm. The younger sisters cleaned, prepared meals, and tended the garden. Sister Agnes continued her routine, but there was a subtle change in the air, a sense of something lasting, a knowledge that the gift of music had created ripples far beyond the walls of the convent. And even as the world continued to marvel at her performance, Sister Agnes remained the same gentle presence she had always been. She played when she could, she served when she must, and she lived quietly, knowing that the beauty of life was found not in recognition, but in the small, meaningful moments shared with others. The days that followed brought a gentle storm of attention to the convent. Sister Agnes's performance had not just touched the hearts of those who attended the charity concert. It had spread far beyond the small town, reaching people who had never even heard of the place. Videos posted online had been shared tens of thousands of times. Comments poured in from across the country and even other continents. People were amazed, inspired, and moved by the story of the quiet nun who played piano with the grace and depth of a lifetime of experience. Despite the growing attention, the convent remained calm. Life continued as it always had. The younger sisters went about their routines, preparing meals, tending the gardens, and keeping the halls spotless. But now there was a subtle buzz in the air. Visitors came from farther towns, asking to see Sister Agnes and hear her play. Many were ordinary people, parents with children, elderly couples, school teachers, and even musicians curious to witness her skill. One bright morning, a small busload of visitors arrived, having heard about her performance through the internet. They were quiet as they entered the hall, respectful of the convent's rules and the gentle nature of the place. Sister Agnes greeted them with her usual soft smile, inviting them to sit quietly as she prepared to play. A young boy, no older than 8, wandered closer to the piano, his eyes wide with curiosity. He had never seen a piano like this up close. "Can she really play like in the video?" he whispered to his mother. She nodded, whispering back, "Just wait and listen." Sister Agnes lifted the lid of the piano, her fingers resting gently on the keys. The hall grew silent. The visitors could feel the weight of anticipation, though no one spoke a word. And then softly she began to play. The first notes were delicate, like whispers of wind through autumn leaves. Slowly, the melody unfolded, flowing with a quiet strength. It was not just music. It was a story. Every chord, every rise and fall carried a lifetime of experiences, memories, and emotions. The boy's eyes widened and he clutched his mother's hand, mesmerized by the sounds that seemed to fill not just the hall but something deeper inside him. People began to feel emotions they did not fully understand. Some were reminded of loved ones they had lost. Others thought of dreams they had set aside or moments they had forgotten. The music reached beyond the simple notes, touching hearts and stirring something unspoken. Even those who had watched the video before felt a new level of emotion, something that only the presence and sincerity of Sister Agnes could create. Among the visitors was a man who had recently lost his father. He sat quietly, his eyes fixed on the piano, feeling tears begin to form. He had always loved music, but in the midst of his grief it had felt distant, unreachable. Hearing Sister Agnes play, he felt a warmth and comfort he had not known in months. The music seemed to speak directly to his soul, telling him that life, love, and beauty still existed, even in sorrow. A young woman in the back who had come with her mother whispered, "It's like she's telling us a story about life itself." Her mother nodded, unable to speak, tears sliding down her cheeks as she listened. She felt as though the nun at the piano had reached into her heart and reminded her of the things that mattered most: kindness, patience, love, and the simple joy of sharing one's gifts. Sister Agnes continued playing, her focus absolute. She did not look up, did not think about the audience, did not even notice the camera crew that had returned to record the moment. She played as she always had, guided only by the music in her heart, letting it flow naturally and fully. Each note carried precision, emotion, and memory. Each pause between notes felt intentional, as if the silence itself had meaning. By the time the piece ended, the hall was completely silent. For several seconds, no one moved. Even the boy at the front, who had been fidgeting moments before, remained frozen, as though afraid to break the spell. Then slowly, applause began. It started quietly, almost hesitantly, and then grew louder. Hands clapped, tears were wiped away, and whispers of admiration filled the room. One of the visitors, an older woman, approached Sister Agnes afterward. "I cannot tell you how much this touched me," she said, her voice trembling. "I came here feeling tired and hopeless, and now I feel alive again. You've reminded me of what is possible even when life feels difficult." Sister Agnes smiled softly. "Music is a gift. It is meant to be shared not for praise but for the hearts that listen." Throughout the day, more visitors arrived. Some traveled from nearby towns, others from cities hours away. Many had seen the video online and felt compelled to see the nun in person. Even local television crews came, but Sister Agnes remained the same gentle, calm presence. She did not pose for cameras or perform for attention. She simply played when asked, allowing the music to speak louder than any words or stories ever could. By evening, the convent hall had filled with ordinary people from all walks of life. Each one arrived with their own experiences, struggles, and stories. They were doctors, teachers, shopkeepers, students, and retirees. Yet in that hall, with Sister Agnes at the piano, all distinctions melted away. They were united by the music, by the beauty and sincerity of someone sharing her gift with humility and love. As the final visitors left, the younger sisters helped her close the piano lid. The hall was quiet again, the sun dipping low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Sister Agnes walked slowly to the garden, tending to the small plants and flowers. She did not reflect on the attention or the videos. She simply appreciated the day for what it was, a chance to share her music and touch lives quietly. That night, as she sat in her small room, she reflected on the events of the past few days. The convent had always been a quiet place, removed from the noise of the world, yet somehow the music had reached beyond the walls, touching people who needed it. She realized that the gift she had once thought hidden or forgotten could inspire hope, comfort, and joy in ways she had never imagined. She thought of the boy at the concert, who had listened with wide-eyed wonder. She thought of the older man who had found comfort in her music after losing his father. She thought of the young woman and her mother, who had shared tears and smiles in equal measure. Each person, each response reminded her that music is not about skill or fame, but about connection, about reaching hearts even in silence. The next morning, the convent received letters, phone calls, and emails. People wanted to express gratitude, to share their stories, and to ask when they might hear her play again. Sister Agnes read them quietly, her heart full but untroubled. She understood that her music had become more than just notes on a page. It had become a bridge, connecting her quiet life to the lives of countless others. The town itself began to notice the change. Locals spoke of the nun who had played piano with grace and humility, who had reminded the world of the beauty and simplicity, and the strength of quiet devotion. Teachers shared her videos with students, telling them that talent and kindness do not fade with age. Families discussed her performance at dinner tables, marveling at the unexpected power of music and the inspiration found in someone so unassuming. Even those who could not visit the convent felt the impact. Letters arrived from faraway towns, from people who had watched the videos online. Many wrote that her story had given them hope, reminded them to cherish hidden talents, and encouraged them to believe that age or circumstance could never limit the gifts of the human heart. Despite all this, Sister Agnes remained unchanged. She continued her work in the convent with quiet diligence. She tended the garden, folded laundry, prepared meals, and lit candles in the chapel. She did not let attention distract her from the simple, meaningful life she had always led. For her, the true value of music was not in recognition or praise, but in the way it could touch hearts and bring comfort, joy, and hope to others. One evening, as the sun set and the hall was empty once more, Sister Agnes sat at the piano alone. She played softly, letting the music flow freely, not for anyone else but for herself. Each note carried memories of her childhood, the lessons she had learned, the years spent in the convent, and the joy of discovering that her music could still move people. She understood something that few truly grasp in life, that a gift, when shared with love and humility, has the power to reach beyond the obvious, to inspire and comfort in ways that cannot be measured. Music was her way of connecting, of speaking a language without words, of sharing a piece of her soul with the world. As she finished, the hall was filled with quiet, a calm that seemed to linger in the air. She closed the piano lid gently, smiled softly, and walked back to her small room. Outside, the stars began to appear in the night sky, each one shining quietly, each one a reminder that even small lights can illuminate the darkness. Sister Agnes went to bed that night with a heart full of gratitude. She had shared her music, inspired others, and reminded the world of the beauty of quiet devotion. Yet she slept peacefully, knowing that the true measure of her gift was not in attention, views, or praise, but in the lives she had touched, the hearts she had reached, and the simple joy of sharing what had always lived within her. The days after Sister Agnes's performances felt almost magical in the town and the convent. People still spoke in whispers of the elderly nun who had played piano with such grace that it moved hearts and inspired hope. Visitors continued to come from far and near, not seeking fame or spectacle, but seeking something genuine, a connection to the simple beauty she shared through her music. Despite all this, life inside the convent remained calm. The sisters followed their daily routines, tending to the garden, preparing meals, cleaning the hallways, and praying in the chapel. But the atmosphere had subtly changed. There was a quiet pride not in recognition or fame, but in knowing that one among them had reminded the world of something extraordinary, that talent, devotion, and kindness can exist quietly and profoundly, even when unnoticed. One morning, Sister Agnes awoke early as she always did. The sun was just rising, casting golden light across the garden. She stepped outside, her hands brushing over the soft petals of the flowers. She paused, feeling the cool morning air, and reflected on how life had unfolded. The long years of quiet devotion, the hidden music she had cherished, and the way that simple gift had unexpectedly reached so many hearts. Lucia, the young novice, approached her with a soft smile. "Sister," she said, "people are still asking about you everywhere. Some are even calling you an inspiration for the whole country." Sister Agnes chuckled quietly, shaking her head. "I am no different than any other sister here. I only play because it is what I know in my heart. But that's exactly why people love you," Lucia replied. "It's the honesty in your music, the way it comes from your life and your heart. That is what makes it extraordinary." Sister Agnes nodded, letting her hands rest lightly on the flowers. She did not play for attention, yet she understood that the gift she shared had traveled far beyond the walls of the convent. That afternoon, a letter arrived at the convent. It was from a small music school in a distant city. They invited Sister Agnes to visit, to speak to the students, and even play for them if she wished. The letter explained that her story had inspired both teachers and students, showing them the beauty of dedication, humility, and the joy of sharing one's talent, no matter the circumstances. Sister Agnes read the letter quietly, her eyes soft but thoughtful. She knew she could not travel far. The convent and its routines were her home, and she did not wish to leave. Yet the thought of sharing her music, even in small ways, brought her a quiet joy. She asked the sisters to send a reply, explaining that while she could not travel, she would be happy to share her music through letters, recordings, and any other way that could reach those who needed it. Over the following weeks, the convent became a quiet hub of creativity. Visitors came with letters, notebooks, and instruments, seeking advice or simply wishing to hear Sister Agnes play again. She welcomed them with her usual calm and warmth, offering music, words of encouragement, and gentle smiles. People left feeling lighter, inspired, and hopeful. The small acts of sharing music, tending the garden, or even offering kind words seemed to ripple outward, creating waves of connection and inspiration that reached far beyond the convent walls. One evening, a teacher from a nearby town came to see her. She brought along a small group of students who were struggling with confidence in their music lessons. The teacher asked Sister Agnes if she could play for them, hoping that hearing her would motivate and comfort them. Sister Agnes agreed quietly. She approached the piano, lifted the lid, and let her fingers touch the keys. She played softly at first, allowing the notes to fill the hall gently. The students listened intently, captivated by the calm authority in her music, the way every note carried not just sound but meaning. Some students closed their eyes, others leaned forward, holding their instruments, trying to absorb the feeling of each chord. As the piece continued, the students began to understand something profound. Music was not just about technique or practice. It was about expression, about connecting with oneself and with others. It was about honesty, patience, and the courage to share a piece of one's soul. By the time the final note faded, the students were moved, some wiping tears from their eyes, others smiling quietly, feeling inspired in ways they had never imagined. Sister Agnes smiled at them, her hands resting on her lap. "Music," she said softly, "is not about being the best. It is about sharing what you have, listening and letting others hear your heart." The teacher looked at her with deep respect. "You've reminded them, and me, of something important. You've shown us that talent, patience, and kindness can change lives." Throughout the town, the story of Sister Agnes continued to grow. Local newspapers ran features on her, focusing not on fame or celebrity, but on the quiet strength of her life, the beauty of her music, and the lessons she offered through humility and dedication. People wrote letters of thanks, shared stories of how her music had inspired them, and even sent recordings of their own performances, hoping to share the joy of music as she had taught them. The convent remained humble and serene despite the attention. Sister Agnes continued her daily routines with quiet dedication, tending to the garden, folding laundry, and lighting candles. She never asked for recognition, never sought praise. For her, the greatest reward was the knowledge that her music had reached hearts, comforted the lonely, and inspired those who needed hope. One evening, as the sun set behind the convent, casting long shadows across the garden, Sister Agnes sat by the piano alone. She played softly, letting the music flow freely, her hands moving with gentle confidence. The hall was empty, yet the music seemed to echo beyond the walls, as if reaching every person who had heard it or seen the videos. Each note carried memories, hope, and the quiet wisdom of a lifetime lived fully and meaningfully. She thought of all the people she had touched: the young boy mesmerized by the piano, the older man who had found comfort in grief, the students learning to trust their own abilities. Each story, each response reminded her that the smallest acts of sharing one's gifts could create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could see. Sister Agnes's life had always been simple. She had chosen a path of devotion, quiet service, and care for others. Yet through music she had discovered a way to reach beyond her own walls, to touch hearts and inspire hope in ways she had never imagined. She realized that talent, when combined with humility and love, could transform ordinary moments into something extraordinary. The next morning, the convent received a letter from a distant school that wanted to establish a scholarship in her name, a way to honor the spirit of generosity, dedication, and inspiration she had shared. Sister Agnes read it quietly, her eyes soft, and she asked the sisters to respond politely. She did not want to seek attention or recognition, but she understood that the scholarship could help others discover their own gifts and bring beauty into the world, just as her music had. Even as the world continued to marvel at her, Sister Agnes remained unchanged. She played when she could, not for applause but for connection. She served when needed, not for recognition but for care. And she lived each day with calm, quiet joy, knowing that the true measure of life was not in fame, wealth, or achievement, but in the love, patience, and generosity shared with others. As weeks turned into months, the convent became a quiet symbol of hope. People continued to visit, children learned lessons of humility and patience, and families left with hearts touched by the gentle music of Sister Agnes. The story of the elderly nun who had been stopped from playing piano but had shared her gift with the world became a tale told in schools, homes, and towns, inspiring generations to believe in the power of quiet devotion, hidden talent, and human connection. Sister Agnes continued to play, her fingers dancing softly over the keys, her music weaving stories without words. She knew she would not live forever, and that her time in the world was limited. But she also knew that the music, the lessons, and the inspiration she shared would live on in the hearts of those she had touched. One evening, as she finished a quiet melody, she looked out the window at the stars beginning to appear in the night sky. She thought about the journey of her life, from a small village with a piano she could barely touch, to years in the convent filled with service and devotion. To the moment when the world unexpectedly heard her music and felt its power, she smiled, feeling gratitude for every step of the journey, for every challenge, every quiet day, and every heart she had reached. She closed the piano lid gently, knowing that life's beauty was found not in attention or fame, but in the quiet, meaningful moments that connect one heart to another. Music, she realized, was a language that could surpass words, and love, kindness, and devotion were the chords that made the song of life whole. Sister Agnes returned to her simple routines, tending to the garden, helping the sisters, and lighting candles in the chapel. The world may have known her as the nun who stunned hearts with her music, but in the convent she was simply Sister Agnes, a quiet, gentle presence, a servant of life, love, and music. And in that simplicity, she found the greatest joy, the deepest peace, and the knowledge that her life, though quiet and humble, had left a mark on the world far greater than any applause could ever measure. Her story, shared through music and heart, continued to inspire, reminding all,